trade negotiations are about leveling the playing field. I'm producing something in a country, whether a good or a service, and I want to reach out to another country, another market, and there are costs to do that, i.e. reducing obstacle of the first category, which is a sort of trade-off. I will reduce my protection of my producers if you reduce the protection of your producers, but it will also be about standards, norms that protect the consumer. What matters for trade deals is first and foremost the size of your market. Volumes matter a lot. If EU or US or China negotiates with Morocco or Chile or New Zealand, there is a big asymmetry. And UK is a 60 plus million consumer. EU is a 500 minus consumer market. So this asymmetry will be there, and it's inevitable because, again, if it's about reducing obstacles to trade, the more volumes, the more efficiency you get. Geographical proximity, of course, is less important than in the past. Most of services are not transported, they are virtual, they are information-based. This is shrinking. All serious economic trade studies show that there remains a strong preference for proximity. And whether UK is in or out EU, or whether Switzerland is in or out, or whether Norway is in or out, they are European. So there is a proximity bias which will remain, and my guess is that UK 10 or 20 years from now will still trade more than 50% with the European continent. At this stage, and we are speaking of end of February, I don't think anybody, at least on the continent, has any clue of what the United Kingdom trade policy, seen from the interests or the benefits of the United Kingdom, would be. There's nothing like a blueprint which would say, as compared to what our trade policy has been for the last decades within the European Union, we want more of this or less of that. I think it's also understandable. The reality is that in all trade negotiations, the most important part of the negotiation is the negotiation with your country, with your producers and with your consumers, because this is where you get your political mandate, which is why they are looking at this sort of transition period, the purpose of which is to have the necessary time to negotiate a proper trade deal, which is extremely complex, and I think everybody will agree that this will not be done by March 2019. What could be done, what should be done between now and October, which is a deadline, probably because this has to be ratified by the EU Parliament, by the EU Council of Ministers, and by the UK Parliament, are what we call in our trade jargon modalities, which are the principles within which, the frame within which this trade relationship will be discussed. So it has to be, for instance, we will look at zero tariffs. Maybe we won't get there everywhere, but the intention on both sides is not to increase tariffs as compared to what they are, and for the moment is zero. Or we will say, the EU will say, no specific cherry picking in market access for services. So the principles have to be there. Then there are two, in my view, probably 2+ years, because I think 2 years is very short for this sort of negotiation, at least that's my experience. We've all been in this business of organizing and promoting convergence. So the notion that you now have to organize divergence, maybe we're a bit old for that, and you need a lot of young, fresh imagination. But my experience is that the more divergence there will be, the more this will result in cost to trade. If you de-level the playing field, you will damage trade. And by the way, this is the other side of the coin. And UK knows that full well. UK was one of the countries that was pushing a lot, saying, let's level the playing field, and this will result in economic efficiencies which are good for growth, welfare, employment, and so on. So the notion that you de-level the playing field inevitably will lead to cost. And I think the only question which has to be looked at in both sides is how do you minimize this? The fundamental difficulty of this equation being, and I think this is now recognized on both sides, that the more UK distances itself from the continent, the more costs this entails to trade, and the less costs you want to impose on trade, the less distance you have to take, which then takes you back to this political question of sovereignty. The difficulty with Brexit is removing the UK egg from the EU omelette. And Ireland is a very specific case because you have an Irish egg within the UK omelette. So you have to deal with the Irish egg within the UK omelette, and you have to deal with the UK egg within the EU omelette. It's horribly complex, not least because of political reasons, because as we all know, the Good Friday Agreement has as a back door. It was backed by the EU, the belonging of both countries to the EU. In my view, there's nothing like a no-border solution. And the problem is whether the border is north-south or east-west, and that's a tricky one.